Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to wait another minute or two while people are still coming in. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us for the What's New in Sage Intacct R4 webinar. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping notes and then I'll turn over the floor to our presenters. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section on your Zoom and we'll get to all those questions at the end. And your recording and slides will be emailed to you following the webinar. This webinar is eligible for 1 CPE credit. In order to receive that CPE credit, you must actively respond to 3 out of the 4 polling questions that will come up throughout the presentation. You must complete the survey that will pop up when we end the presentation and stay on for the entire duration of the webinar. If you have any issues or any questions regarding this, please just email me. My email is on that slide. And with that, I will turn it over to you guys to get us started.
Thank you, Kristen. Greetings, everybody. I would love to introduce Mike Primiani. I probably butchered your last name, Mike, to you all. Mike is hosting the main part of the webinar today. I'll be here to answer any questions as we go through it. And we're very happy to have Mike as part of the JMT staff. He's one of our, what I like to call the newbies, but he's doing a fabulous job. And so with that, Mike, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Just as a refresher, here's a map of all the places of our clients where we operate. We are spreading out further west, which I'm happy about. Look at all those Texas people, and with the headquarters being in Nashville. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. And for those that are relatively new to JMT, we have many different services. We implement and support the cloud-based ERP solutions like Sage Intacct and MIP and some others. We also implement and support several budget management solutions, including the Sage Intacct Budget and also Martis. We also now provide outsourced accounting services. Our CAS team is relatively new, but growing like you wouldn't believe. And the rest you can also read. And so we have several partners. All of the logos are right there. And which is nice because we're not just representing one software partner, we represent several. So whatever we find works best for our clients, that's who we're going to partner with. So next slide. And I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about Innovate. It's coming up soon in 7 short months. This year, it'll be in Nashville, which is exciting. You can still get the early bird discount by registering on the jmtconsulting.com website. We highly look forward to seeing you all in person. This year also, we've expanded our pre-conference sessions. And so, which was a big hit last year, where we get to do a deeper dive, such as dashboards and reporting and some of the other areas. We're also doing a pre-conference on budgeting and then the standard Intacct new user trainings. So we would love to see you at Innovate at Nashville this time. We have some exciting things planned for you in the evenings. And of course, we'll always feed you. So please register for Innovate on our conference so that we can meet in person. All right, Mike, I believe that is it, right?
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dougie. You did not butcher my name. That was perfect pronunciation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everyone's having a great day. So the learning objectives for today, we'll identify core new features in Sage Intacct from this release, and then we'll touch on some features from prior releases as well. We'll demonstrate some of those new features, and then we'll review the benefits of the new functionality. Topics that we'll cover today include some updates in the company and administration module, a new customer and vendor reconciliation report, which will match payments against invoices. Some updates in accounts payable, including the ability to send payment notifications to multiple recipients. Some updates for projects and grants users. We can now use retainage, which was strictly for construction customers, but now available to everybody. Updates in fixed assets. The big one being transaction allocation, so we can allocate depreciation across multiple dimensions. We have a general ledger outlier detection tool. This was released earlier, but we'll go through some benefits of this and how this works. We'll talk about the enhanced lists that you're starting to see throughout Intacct in beta mode. We'll touch on 1099 prep coming up to the end of the year. And then we'll plug our upcoming webinars and events that JMT will be hosting. All right, so how many times have you found yourself digging through old emails trying to find something that you need? I know it happens to me a lot, and this is typically what happens when it comes time for Intacct customers to sign up for the Sage Intacct community or Sage University. Every customer has a unique customer ID, and you need that customer ID to sign up. So what happens is when they can't find their ID in their email, they'll email Dougie and I asking for their ID, and now they're delayed signing up because they got to wait for us to respond. So if you haven't signed up yet, you have no more excuses. You can go access your customer ID in the general information tab of the company configuration. So no more excuses. And why should you sign up? Because there's a ton of helpful articles, videos, training courses, and other educational materials.
As a side note, if I can jump in, if you have enhancements requests, if you are signed up on the community to the knowledge base, you can log your own enhancement requests, and you can also upvote other enhancement requests. Sorry, I can't speak today. That are in the community, and the more you upvote requests, enhancement requests, the faster Intacct will get to them. So that's just a brief commercial break to sign up for the community. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dougie. We'll jump right into our first poll. So Kristen's going to pull that up for you to respond. Have you signed up for Sage Intacct Community and or Sage University? And we'll give you a minute to respond to that. Too many no's. I need to see more both coming up on that.
Sign up, y'all.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. And for the ones who just did the one or the other, sign up for the other. Very helpful tools. I've learned a lot using both of those resources already in my time with JMT. Okay, Kristen, how do I close this out?
Just go to the next slide.
Next slide. Okay, gotcha. Okay, next, if you joined the webinar for the third quarter release, you'll know Sage is rolling out enhanced email delivery services. So if you send emails out of Sage using a custom domain, you must authenticate and validate your domain, and this needs to be done by May 2025. Okay, I'm not really a technology expert, but the benefits are authenticating your domain will help you ensure your email communications are secure and reliable. It will improve email deliverability and reduce the chance of your messages being marked as spam. So if you got that feedback from your customers or your vendors that they're not getting your emails, they're seeing them in their spam boxes, this will help alleviate that. And again, this needs to be done by May 2025. I don't have an exact date, so let's call it April 30th to be safe. You can find more information on this topic on the help community, and I'm sure your IT departments can provide some clarity if you need. And I'll show you where you can access this in Intacct once we start going through some demos.
Mike, I do have a question that pertains to signing up for the community and Sage, the Learning Center. And so the question is, what sort of benefit do we get from Sage University? So Sage University, and it is a separate login, but you have to be logged on to the community first in order to actually sign up and register for the university. For the Sage University, you have access to a lot of learning courses. This is me speaking as a trainer because I get a little swamped with training requests. And Sage University, you can sign up for a lot of free courses. I mean, there are those that cost, but there are quite a few free courses for if you're interested in some new functionality or maybe interested in a module where you want to do a deeper dive, you can sign up on the Sage University for those courses. And you'd be surprised how many of them are free. So it's not only for regular articles or things like that. It's also for a lot of free courses that Sage makes available on the university. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Dougie. Yes, highly recommend the fundamentals one to get you going in Intacct if you're a newer client and just getting started. Okay, this next feature Dougie and I are excited about because we have a couple of projects going on right now where we're investigating historical data. We're trying to match up, AP bills against the respective payment that was applied to those bills. So now Intacct will do that for us with the vendor and customer reconciliation reports. Unfortunately for Dougie and I, it only works on a go-forward basis, so we are stuck doing these projects kind of the old-fashioned way, building custom reports, manually matching up information from multiple data sources. So if you ever had an issue where your records don't match what your customers or your vendors have in their systems, this could be a useful tool to provide some quick clarity on what was applied and where it was applied. The feature is available in AR and AP. It uses the matching sequence to tell us which payments were applied to a given invoice or bill. And even if you have adjustments or credit memos that you're applying to invoices or bills, those will show up on here as well. So you see in the screenshot that first invoice has that match sequence of AAAEH. And then a few lines down, we see that same sequence twice on the two payments. So this tells us those two payments were applied to that invoice. It will also tell you which invoices and payments have been partially applied. We don't see that in this screenshot here, but I'll show you an example when we get to the demo. The configuration is the same for AR and AP. You'll enable the reconciliation in the AR and AP configurations. You'll create your matching sequence. I'll walk you through that. And you'll give users permissions to run the report. So if you don't give them permissions, it's still functioning in the background, but the user will not be able to run the report and see what we just saw in the screenshot. Okay, now we can walk through an example of that in Intacct. Dougie, you can see my Intacct screen, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so before we do that, I'll show you quickly those two updates in the company module. So if you go into company, under configuration, and click company, and then we go to the security tab, and we scroll a little down, we'll see email sender domain settings. This looks different than what you saw in the screenshot because this is just our webinar instance, so nothing's set up here. Not quite sure what the sender key is. But if you have it set up, you'll see what you saw in the screenshot. And then back to the general information tab, here we see that customer ID. Okay, so jumping into the reconciliation, I'm going to show you an example in accounts receivable, but again, same thing, AR and AP. So we'll go into the configuration for accounts receivable. And we'll scroll down a little bit and we see retainage. Oh, excuse me, that's later in the webinar. We're going to go under document sequencing and we're going to go enable customer reconciliation. And then we're going to do our match sequence. So this is one I had created to test, but we'll add a new one. So this may look familiar to you. If you set up your document sequencing for AR or AP, it's the same thing. If you're a JMT client, we may have set it up for you, so you may not be familiar with this, but I'll walk you through it. So we're going to call this sequence, we're going to call it AR match. So we have the sequence type option for numeric or alpha. So if this was for AR invoices or AP invoices, you can use either. But for the purposes of the reconciliation, we have to use alpha. If we create it with numeric and then we go to save the configuration, you will get an error. And I'll show you why it's alpha in a little bit. Our primary sequence maximum, this tells us like the last sequence, the last possible value in the sequence. I'm going to shorten this for purposes of the example. And I'm just going to do 5 characters. I'll give it a prefix, AR. And then my first number is just going to be 5 A's. Okay, next we'll go and we'll look at those permissions to make sure that our users can run the report. So we'll go into our roles. We're going to look right at this role, all rights, so down here, just for an example. We'll look in accounts receivable. And we'll scroll all the way down to the bottom under reports. It's the second option here, customer reconciliation. And again, it's just to run the report. All right, so now I'm going to go to our accounts receivable aging. And I'm going to pick some invoices for us to pay, to mark as paid so we can see the reconciliation. So I had created a test customer. We'll go right to that test customer and we'll see. Not very creative. Mike test customer is the name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down right into the invoice and I'm going to apply a payment to the invoice right from this screen. So if you find yourself just doing a one-off instance, you can go into either an AR invoice or an AP bill, and you could apply payment just to that bill instead of going through the manual process and having to comb through the bills or the invoices that you want to apply payment to. All right, so here I'm on the invoice screen. I'm just going to click apply payment. All right. So for purposes of this example, I'm only going to partially pay this invoice. So I'll just call it amount received 500. And we'll just give it a reference of test. And we'll apply the payment. Now what we'll do is we'll run that reconciliation report. So we'll go to AR. Under reports on the right-hand side, we see customer reconciliation. So I'm going to change my reporting period to current year just to capture everything from this current year. And I'm going to filter just for that Mike test customer. Okay, so we see our two invoices that we saw on the aging, the 1,000 and the 1,500, and we see our payment of $500. And now we see the match sequence of AR, AAAAA. That tells us this $500 is applied to this $1,000. All right, notice the lowercase letters. All right, so now let's enter another payment. Now I'm going to drill down into the invoice this way, and I'll apply another payment. I'm going to add both invoices so we could apply this payment, this next payment, to both invoices. And for this example, we'll use $1,000 and we'll call it test 2. And then over here, we can select how much we're applying to each invoice. So let's do 500 to each invoice. And then let's go back to that customer reconciliation. Our Mike test customer, and let's see what it looks like. All right. Now we see some capital letters, right? That thousand match sequence on that $1,000 is now capital letters. That tells us it's fully applied. So lowercase letters, partially applied. Fully uppercase letters, fully applied, right? We see our $1,000 payment broken out into 2 lines down here because 500 was applied to one invoice, matched against one invoice, and the other 500 against the other invoice. And again, exact same thing for AP, same configuration, same process, same sequencing, same process.
So just from my observation, I've seen a lot of you all do partial payments in accounts receivable for invoices, like grant invoices or whatever. This match sequence is really beneficial if you have to do reconciliation. As Mike said, we've been roped into helping reconcile some historical data, and this would have been very, very helpful to do that. In AP, even though the functionality is the same, I mean, it's only beneficial if you do a lot with partial payments. If you do get one invoice, one AP bill in, and you pay that one AP bill, that match sequence won't be of much help because it's a one-to-one, right? But in AR, where partial payments are more the norm than full payments, then this could be very, very beneficial. And also, side note, have you all noticed that Mike drilled down from the report to the bill and applied payment? So, because a lot of you all, when I'm in trainings and things like that, I notice that you actually get out of the invoice, you go to posted payments, or you select payments new and then do the payment. You don't have to. You can actually pay from the report, whether it's the aging report or whether it's this reconciliation report. It comes in very handy. Thank you, Vanna, to apply the payment right there from the invoice. So I just wanted to call that out because it's a neat little feature. And those of you on this call, I recognize a lot of these names, and you've been on Intacct for a while, and I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that there are multiple ways to apply payments. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dougie. So we'll jump into our next poll question. Is reconciling customer and or vendor activity a pain point for your organization? A lot more yeses than I thought, to be honest with you. So about evenly split. A little more weight to the yes, which is surprising to me, but cool. I'm glad that tool is now available to you, and I hopefully that was beneficial for you guys. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Couple of updates on accounts payable. First, enhanced functionality to pay bills is coming. Currently only available to early adopters, so we'll have to be on the lookout for this, but we can expect higher capacity bill processing, easier ways to drill down to credits, and the ability to sort and filter columns. We've had a few clients ask us about this next functionality, whether they can send automatic payment notifications to more than one recipient. Well, up until this release, the answer was no. But now we can send it to 2 recipients. So Sage Intacct will send those payment notifications to the primary email address and secondary email address of the Pay-To contact specified on the contact list tab of the vendor record. Did you get that? I'll walk you through it when we get back into Intacct. If you enable this functionality, but one of your vendors doesn't have a secondary email address defined for their contact, don't worry about it. It will still only send it to that first email address. It will not generate an error. So we see that the configurations on the bottom of the page. I'll walk you through them as well. We'll include secondary email contacts and automatic payment notifications. And then we'll apply it on customer record. Vendor record, excuse me. So we'll go back into Intacct now, and we'll take a look at that. So we go into accounts payable. Our configuration, and we'll look for that secondary email address. There you go. It's under the enable functionality, includes second email address contacts. And then if we go to our vendor record, we use this vendor right here, filters and more, as an example. All right, so if we go into the contact list tab here, we see the Pay-To contact, that's same as vendor, right? So that tells us, well, first, hold on 1 second. We have to first enable the send automatic payment notification on the vendor record. Then we look at the contact list. We see the Pay-To contact is same as vendor. So that tells us now it's going to use these email addresses on this first tab, email address and secondary email address. Now, if you wanted to assign a separate contact to your vendor, we can do that. We'll go back to this contact list tab. We'll edit. I think I clicked it too fast there, 1 second. And in this bottom category where it says contact lists, we'll add our contact. And we'll just use this ABC Office Supplies as an example. Now back up here to our Pay-To contact, we have the option to add that contact. And if we drill down into that contact, we'll see the primary email address on the contact information tab. And then on the additional information tab, we have the secondary email address. So if you were looking for that functionality, it's now available to you. The next topic is retainage. So this is more common in the construction industry, so it was only available to construction clients up until this release. Now it's available to everybody. If you don't know what retainage is, it's also known as retention. And it's a portion of a project that is intentionally withheld from a project until it's substantially complete. So this may be useful to you if, let's say, you have a consultant that's working for you and you agree to retain a portion of the contract until the work was complete. You know, you set up the invoice for the full amount and you retain that certain amount. Or maybe if you do some sort of monthly billing where you want to set up the grant in full, and now you could track, let's say, what's left on the invoice in retainage. And then you could kind of release the retainage to bill the subsequent amounts. You might want to test that out in the sandbox, see how it kind of works and how it flows through your accounting.
And also, what the reason we're calling this out is that more and more of you have the projects or grants billing module where you're doing grant billing or project billing through Intacct, and this works with that module. If you don't have that module, this will not work. We lost your screen, Mike.
I know I'm having some Zoom's difficulties here. I'm very sorry. Okay.
So I just wanted to make note that it's available if you have the billing module, but if you don't, then you won't be able to make use of that functionality.
Yes, this is available for projects and grants billing. And if it cannot be used if you have a contract subscription. So the feature is available in AP and AR, similar to the reconciliation. To configure the retainage, you want to enable it in AR and AP. So you see the example on the left, I'm configuring it in accounts receivable. You'll have to create up your retainage account, right? So best practice would be to set up a separate account specific to that. So you see I created this account 12050 AR retainage. And then you'll have to set up your document sequence. So here I'm using the same document sequence as AR invoices. Right, so this I'm telling it to use that same sequence. So we're not like starting from one again when we're releasing our retainage, right? Because when we release retainage, that's going to generate an invoice to our customers. And then in the middle, we see the configuration in AP. I don't have it checked off here, but same thing. And then in the middle on the bottom, we have to enable retainage on our transaction definition. So this is within order entry and purchasing. So this example, I'm setting it up on a sales order, right? That's our transaction that's ultimately going to be converted into an invoice. And then last on the right, we'll have to set up the default retainage percentage on the customer's account. And then you could override that when you're doing your invoice or your order entry. You could override it on the line level. When it comes to release retainage, you'll create a release retainage batch. This creates one invoice per currency for each customer in the specified amount. So let's say you initially retain $1,000. You can only release half of that if you need. So of course your users will need permissions set up under the accounts receivable or accounts payable permissions. And then you'll run your retainage right within the AR or AP module. So now I'll demo an example of retainage for you. So we'll go back to our accounts receivable configuration and we'll look for those settings. So see it towards the top under accounting settings, retainage. And then we'll quickly look at those permissions, company, roles, and then we'll go back to this guy, all rights. And then we'll look under accounts receivable. And then all the way towards the bottom, the last one before reports, accounts receivable release retainage. So this gives your user permission to release the retainage, not necessarily set it up, but release it. All right, now let's look at an example. We'll go to our customer, our mic test customer, and we'll add that retainage, default retainage amount. It's under the additional information tab, default retainage percentage, and let's go with 10%. Now I'll go and I'll create my order entry. And I'm just going to create any type of invoice here, and don't pay too much attention to what dimensions I'm putting in here. I'm just going to put whatever I got to get it to go in here, so it doesn't give us errors. So you see here, this column at the end, retainage percentage. If we wanted to override it, we can. Oops. So see, change it to 5. Auto calculates the amount retained. Put it back to 10. And we'll post this. So now our order entry is posted. We'll convert it to an invoice. And I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to post it right through. Hopefully I don't get an error. Perfect. So now if we drill down into our sales order, and this is going to be a little bit of a maze here, and I wasn't able to see this detail when I went right through the invoice. If I go accounts receivable and then I just go through the invoice, I wasn't able to see this level of detail. So we got to go through this little maze through the sales order. But if you go through sales order, history, click the AR here, we're almost at the end, posting details. So now we see all the details of that retainage. So here's the invoice. Here's the gross amount, the 5,000, the amount due, the 4,500, less the $500 retainage. And then on the bottom, we have our journal entry. So a $5,000 credit to sales, 4,500 to AR going out to the customer, and then 500 sitting in retainage until we release it. All right. So now let's go ahead and release that retainage and see what that looks like. So we'll go into accounts receivable. We have our big retainage button right here. You can see how many times I practiced this throughout the week. And we'll go to add. So right now here, add, we're just basically giving it the date we want it to run. So we're just going to use today's date. It's probably typical what you use unless you want to backdate it or future date it. All right, so here, don't panic. It's nothing populated, but we got to go to the add button. And then we'll see all the retainage we have available to release. So we see just that one example we have, and the amount retained 500. Select it, add selected. Now it's available to release here. We'll select it on the left-hand side. This becomes available to populate. And let's just say we want to release half of it. Now we'll release retainage. All right, let's go back through that order entry maze. Sales order. View. History. We'll click the invoice. Posting details. All right, so we see a little more information here. The original invoice up top. Now we have the invoice that released the retainage, right? So the $250. So now we notice that the AR invoice, right? The original one is 388. The one down here is 389. That's because we use that same document sequencing, right? So in this case, nothing is in between. That's why we're able to see it, consecutive. But that's what that document sequencing is telling us. And on the bottom, we see our two more lines, releasing the credit to the retainage to release it, and the debit to the accounts receivable to go out to the customer. And our two separate journal entries that are posted from retainage, that are posted on the back end.
So Mike, whenever you're done with retainage, we have some questions.
All right, I'm done with retainage.
All right. So this is going back to customer reconciliation. So as a way of review, this question is, how can one access the customer reconciliation report? Do you mind just going through that again, just
Yep.
for AR?
Yep. So once you make it available with the permissions, so we'll have to give the users permissions. So we'll go into roles. If you're role based, you go into roles. If you're user based, you'll go into the user, right? And we'll go into accounts receivable or accounts payable, depending which one you're using it for. And all the way at the bottom is the customer reconciliation under reports. Customer reconciliation, you give that user the permission to run it. And then once they have that permission, you go into accounts receivable. And on the right-hand side, under reports, on the bottom, you'll see that customer reconciliation.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, and so the other, still on the topic of reconciliation, but vendor reconciliations, the question is, how come we cannot use numeric sequences for vendor reconciliations?
So my best guess is to this is because they use that uppercase, lowercase sequencing to tell you which payments or which invoices are fully paid or partially paid. I think with the numeric sequence, they can't have that functionality. So that's my best guess.
Yeah, and side note, we don't know either, but that makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. One more question. She asks, do I need to enable release to pay to ensure vendors receive payment notifications? So, Mike, if you would go to a vendor record, please. The short answer is no, you do not, but we're going to show you the setting that you need to do for payment notifications. So any vendor record, I don't care. If you go to you edit the vendor record, you go to the payment information tab. Do you see on the top left where it says send automatic payment notification? That's what needs to be checked if you want that vendor to receive payment notification. And then the sidebar on that is there are two choices for payment notifications. Would you mind going to accounts payable configuration, setup configuration? On accounts payable setup configuration. So when you send out payment notifications, if you go down to, keep going, right there. Also under the release to pay, you can either have so the default is a PDF attachment of the payment notification will go along with the email. A lot of people don't want to use attachments because of spam and who knows what else. And so you now have the choice to include the payment notification in the body of your email. So if you just want a PDF attachment, you don't have to check mark the two bottom check marks that say do not include payment copy in payment notification email or include payment details. Don't check mark those. That's if you don't check mark those, you're just going to get an attachment. If you do check mark both of them, then you will not get an attachment, but you'll get the payment notification as part of the email. Okay, so that's what that is. So, but it doesn't have anything to do with the enable release to pay. That's at the top of this section. That it has nothing to do with that. It's strictly a vendor record setting. Okay, I think that's all well, nope. Oh, another question on AR reconciliation. Isn't it easier or convenient to use the invoice analysis report in doing customer AR reconciliation?
I don't know. What do you think there, Dougie?
No, so go ahead and pull up invoice analysis so we can illustrate.
I gotta be honest with you, I don't think I've played with this report yet.
Okay, cool, not a problem. We shall train the trainer. So the invoice analysis, actually, let's use the AR ledger, or yeah, let's use the AR ledger. The difference between the AR ledger and the invoice analysis report is that AR ledger is strictly customer based. You get your customers groupings. It's basically your customer activity report. The invoice analysis, you can then run, you can group it by customer, or you can group it by revenue GL number, or you can group it, you have different choices of grouping because you're focusing on the invoice and not specifically the customer. So if you have the AR ledger, for example, you can see the payment records and you can see the invoices, but you can't tell which payment was applied to what invoice in detail there. And so the AR reconciliation is extremely helpful, especially I know a lot of you, because I've been on calls with you, have multiple payments per invoice, especially if it's a large dollar amount payment. So if you run the AR ledger or the invoices analysis, you'll see all those individual line items for payments, but you have no clue as to which invoice those payments were linked to when you're just looking at this report. That AR reconciliation report is so nice because now you can sort it by that reconciliation ID. I forgot the correct terminology, and it'll link it all together. So that's the I'm a big fan of that, especially if you have multiple payments per invoice.
Yeah, Dougie, I think we just turned that on without people even knowing, so we have it.
Go Got it. So one last question that just came in. She says, I know this might be out of topic, but how can I see the payment records sent? You mean the AR invoice payments like I just showed you on the AR ledger? So that's one way of doing it. Let's go to the accounts receivable drop-down menu and the posted payments screen. I want to make sure, no, under accounts, sorry, I said accounts payable, I meant accounts receivable. You can't read my mind. So I want to make sure that you all are also familiar with the posted payment screen, because when you click on view, you will be able to see what invoice it was associated with. But most of you should know this screen, but let's also now go back to the invoice analysis report, whatever it was called. Yeah, go to report. So you can do your regular stuff, right? The regular date ranges, you can do your regular filters. Notice also though, you can filter by customer type and GL account. Can you scroll down a little bit more? Go to the format section. So we can also include receipt details. That's that check mark right below. That's the payment, but the format section is the important thing. Do you see the group by? Mike, if you click on that drop down arrow by group by, you can group by GL account number. That's the revenue stuff that was on the record. You can group by department, you can group by location, you can group by all these different things. So you can slice and dice your data on this report really nicely. So let's do group by account number is fine, because you're using the same customer, right? And put a check mark in include receipt details right below the location filter. If you go a little higher, you went right past it and put a check mark there and click view. So notice now here, it's still the same data. We're still using just the data for the Mike test customer, and you're still seeing the amount paid, and you're still seeing, all that information, the total paid. What's nice though here is you can at least group it by the GL number that the revenue was credited to. It's not necessarily the same invoice. We don't know what invoice it was applied to because we don't have the AR reconciliation on this screen. But that's just to make a point where AR reconciliation, that new reconciliation sequence will come in extremely handy. And if you want to talk to us offline about it, just reach out to either Mike or myself and we can give you some examples because both of us have had to deal with a lot of historical reconciliation in the past few weeks and months.
Yeah, I see now his question because you see this is kind of telling us what the payments were applied to, but you don't have that match sequence. So if you wanted to take the data, export the data, to run some sort of VLOOKUP or something, now you don't have your reference point.
Yeah, but it's grouping by GL number, not invoice. So if you have multiple invoices with the same GL number, you still don't know which invoice it was applied to from this report, unless you drill down,
I see what you're saying.
right?
Yeah, so it just happens because this is with the same invoice, the same
Yep.
GL number.
Yep. You
Gotcha.
got it.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Cool.
that's it for the questions.
All right, let's get back to our PowerPoint. Well, before that, we'll have our third poll question. Does your organization have a need to utilize this retainage feature?
And we are running a little bit low on time, so you may want to answer fast.
Yeah, answer fast. And we'll pick up the pace. All right, overwhelmingly no on that one.
Okay, good to know.
All right, fixed asset allocation. So a few updates in fixed assets, the biggest one being transaction allocations. This allows you to distribute asset transactions across multiple dimensions. For example, splitting depreciation between multiple departments. I'm sorry, I'm getting used to this Zoom. Okay, go away. So we need to properly configure to allow this to run, and we need to create the transaction allocation in advance that will apply to the asset. So once you create the asset, you go into the asset and you set the allocation, which we see down here, right, that you created in advance. So here's the configurations. We have to enable the transaction allocation in the journal entry, in the general ledger, in accounts payable, and also on our transaction definitions, right? So in this example, our purchase order, and then here in general ledger, you'll see the transaction allocations. Those are what you set up in advance and apply to the asset. Some other quick notes on transaction allocations for fixed assets. You can change an asset's allocation when the asset is in the ready for review or in-service states. Changes apply to all future transactions only. You can assign additional dimensions on the asset if they are not already defined in the allocation. The next section is a little bit of confusing, but essentially you cannot allocate locations. You cannot cross locations. Okay, and the same thing for the next one. Allocation definitions must be created in the entity where they'll be used. So we're not crossing entities. And allocations are not supported for companies subscribed to taxes application at this time. Some other fixed asset updates. When posting entries from the post depreciation page, you now have the ability to choose a custom posting date. The new date will override the scheduled posting date. So this could be useful if you have to catch up depreciation or delay depreciation if the asset wasn't put into use right away. There's now an add notes field attached to an asset record. You could use this at your discretion to record any details or notes that you have on the asset. Supports up to 2,000 characters, so that's a little bit of detail that you have there. This could be an example of, why you had to delay the depreciation, why you had to override the posting date. Enhanced lists are available on the bulk action runs and asset group pages. These pages now align with the rest of the fixed asset management application, so they might have some value to you if you use that fixed asset application. And last but not least, a single workspace, a more streamlined import process by combining all fields into a single sheet. So now you can add assets and set depreciation into one import. I'm going to roll through this quickly because we're
Yep.
running on time here.
Mhm.
The general ledger outlier detection is a new AI tool. It's meant to improve measures and assist with your approval process by improving accuracy in journal entries. So it will analyze your historical transaction patterns and it will compare it to transactions that are submitted for approval. And it flags transactions that have anomalies that don't match your historical data. So let's say, for example, you have an account and department combination that Sage Intacct that will take the combination, but you don't regularly use that combination. The outlier detection will flag it. And then when the approver goes to review that journal entry, they'll see an additional column in the journal entry. Sorry, I don't have a screenshot of this. They'll see an additional column that calls out the outlier. And then you click it and it tells you exactly what it is. Department, location, combo, doesn't match. There's an outlier assistant. If you turn this on, the system will automatically recall entries that are flagged with outliers, send it back to the submitter to review. Right? If no outlier is detected with the assistant, it's either routed to the approver, or if that user is available, is enabled to self-approve. If no outlier is detected, it will post the journal entry. There's a materiality threshold, so you can set a limit. So if an entry is under X dollars, it won't even run the detection. It will just push it right through. And then you could prioritize your dimensions. The higher on the list your dimensions, the more weight they carry in the evaluation. So a quick example of the threshold, you have 2 transactions for approval. Your materiality is $50. The first submission is for $25.50 because it's below the materiality, it's not evaluated. The second submission is for $200. The submission is evaluated for class and then location. If there's no anomalies, no outliers flagged. If there's an anomaly with either the class or the location, flagged for review. When you enable the outlier detection, it takes 24 to 48 hours to evaluate your data and start to function. In order to work, there are some requirements. So you'll need at least 1 month of data that's less than 2 years old and 1,000 posted GL journal entry lines, so line items, not entries. And you'll get your best results for journals with at least 100 posted transactions. So if you're a newer client, you may not, get more value out of this in the short term. You're just running through the configurations quick. You go into your subscriptions, you'll turn on AI machine learning. This is available to everybody. And then you'll enable data service, enable general ledger, and here's the warning for the 24 to 48 hours.
All right.
All right. And then a couple
Yeah.
other configurations here. In the general ledger, you'll enable journal entry approvals. You'll set which journal entries you want it on. You can turn on your outlier assistant here, and then you have your materiality threshold and your dimension priority. And that's under the general ledger configuration. So running short on time, so I'm just going to throw it to, we got a 4th poll question real quick. Would you be interested in a webinar further discussing and demonstrating GL outlier detection?
The poll question, there we go. We'll just take a minute. Answer quick. And the last slide, I'll just talk to it, is about the new functionality with the list screens. If you've seen the enable beta use list beta interface, we highly encourage you to start using that. All the codes now have that functionality. All the AP transaction screens have that functionality. And we're not going to demonstrate it. We're not going to talk more about it. You can see it on the screens. I've talked about it in previous what's new webinars, and test it out. If you have questions, let us know. Okay. We thank you all for attending. And if you have further questions, please reach out to us and we will be happy to assist. Thank you all very much for your time and for your attendance. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.